Hello again. We're going to get right back with it. This will be a lengthier video. I have a lot of facts and information to give you, but to start with, I have a new follower on Facebook, and so if you've recently followed and liked my page, hello to you. You met my mother, Tammy, on an airplane on your way home from, at least departing from Las Vegas to St. Louis, unless you had a connecting flight. But you landed in St. Louis the other day nonetheless, and I guess you guys spoke in quite detail about your lives, and I came up somewhere in the middle there. Thanks, Mom, for sharing my page, and thank you for the new follow. I hope that yourself and your wife find some interesting information here as we continue along in our journey, and this is the Chronological Gospel Study. The name of my class is Context Gives Clarity. That's how I teach, straight from Scripture, and our understanding of it. And so let's jump in here. I will put these notes in the description below. So of course, by the time you're reading this or hearing it, you're going to have that information. And so anyway, there will be a lot to write down. This was a big one. And so not a lot of scripture, but just a lot of facts and things to kind of take note on here. But first, we're going to read a small scripture that's only recorded in Mark 8. Let's jump over there. And this is going to be Mark 8, 22 to 26. And so this is kind of in between. And then we're actually going to be in Matthew, Mark, and we're going to bring Luke back into the picture. And so remember, we're back and forth, Jewish territory, Gentile territory. And so let's jump in here to Mark 8:22. Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him, and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of town. And when he had spit on his eyes, he put his hands on him, and he asked him if he saw anything. He looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. So then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. And then he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell anyone in the town. So Bethsaida is Jewish territory, and we pick up on some of those, which is the tell no one, right? The private healing. It says right here, he led him out of town. This was a private healing, as opposed to when we were just amongst those Gentiles and the 4,000 when he fed them. He was amongst 4,000 people, healing everybody that was coming, right? And so this is, it's all following the facts that we stated after the unpardonable sin there. Okay, and so we're not going to get too much into this. I see men like trees walking, and the metaphor he's using here for the comparison, but essentially what it means is that he had partial blindness. So when he was going through the healing process, he had partial blindness, and this is in comparison to the Jews. The Jews have partial blindness to their Lord, right? They see and recognize him as their Lord, but they're not recognizing and seeing him for who he is right then, right? They think he's the son of David as opposed to the son of Joseph as a servant, and so they're not quite understanding, and nor are his disciples, and so for that matter. But that is what that kind of comparison is there, to give you a little bit more of a clear view on why it was, let's do this twice. And so that just gives us a little information behind that one. So now we're going to jump into Matthew 16, 13 through 20. We're going to be in Mark 8, 27 through 30, and we're going to be in Luke 9, 18 to 21. I'm going to read Matthew's version last, and then we'll get into it. So let's just come on over. Well, we're in Mark, so let's just come on down and read Mark 22 through 27. So, Mark 27 through 30. Let's come down a little farther. Okay. Now Jesus and his disciples went out to the towns of Caesarea Phillippi, and on the road he asked his disciples, saying to them, who do men say that I am? So they answered, John the Baptist, but some say Elijah, and others one of the prophets. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? Peter answered and said to them, you are the Christ. Then he strictly warned them that they should tell no one about him. Let's go on over to Luke, and we're going to be Luke 18 to 21. And it happened as he was alone praying that his disciples joined him, and he asked them, saying, who do the crowds say that I am? So they answered and said, John the Baptist, but some say Elijah, and others say that the one of the old prophets has risen again. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Peter answered and said, the Christ of God. let's go over to Matthew 16. And we're going to be in 13 through 20 here. So, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I am? The Son of Man? Am? The Son of Man am." Let's repeat that. Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? There we go. So they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So Jesus answered and said to him, notice this little section is in addition to what we just read in Mark and Luke. "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for the flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And when I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he commanded his disciples that they should tell no one that he was Jesus, the Christ. So, let's get into these notes. Remember, as I've said before, when we have specific names, when we have locations, times, these are all important details. Highlight them, underline them, take note of them. And it's so for future reference. When we come back and we're restudying and reading in our scriptures, we will see the highlighted notes, and it'll kind of trigger the learning and the study that we did here, right? And so this region here is important. Region of Caesarea Philippi. Okay, my highlighter doesn't want to keep going there, but there it is. Region of Caesarea Philippi. This is of geographic importance, so we highlight that, right? So it's at the foot of Mount Hermon, which is known to be the tallest mountain in the Holy Land, about 9,000 feet above sea level. So you can know and kind of judge where we're at. And so this is, and being read in the Greek, right, as the second question. So, and answer. This is what I'm talking about here. When Jesus says, "Who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am?" And he said that in all three Gospels, right? So remember that in the Greek, when something is read, the answer is emphatic, right? And so it is bringing special attention to, right? That's what that means. So he's not just asking the question, but he's putting an emphasis on the question. So, when he says, "Who do men say that I am?" But then he says, "But who do you say that I am?" Right? And we know that's important, especially as we get into scripture, when we have to give an account for, our belief, right? And so, who do you say that I am? That doesn't mean that we all get to have some of our own version of an opinion of who Jesus is, right? It's about knowing Jesus in your heart and knowing who he is, right? And so we all have a personal relationship with him, and we have personal stories we can share, but Jesus is who he is, right? And so this kind of brings out that personal relationship. And so we have a couple different words here. So when you read down in verse 17, I'm in Matthew 16 here. "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah." Okay, if you've ever wondered what that meant, we've spoke on it a little bit before, but I'll touch on it again here. Okay, in the Greek, you have the word bar. So this is how we know that we're reading in the Greek, and so where he's speaking. And then in the Hebrew, we have ben. Okay, B-E-N. Again, this will be in the notes below. And these both mean son of, as in character of. Okay, Simon Bar-Jonah. You are the son of, or in the character of, Jonah. Okay, and so that is what he's speaking of here. Jonah's been mentioned a couple of times when in reference to the cross. Remember, Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days. He kind of resisted going and doing what he needed to do, but then upon arrival, after he, excuse me, I'm readjusting how I'm sitting here. He finally, it took some, right, a lot more encouragement, right? But we have the 3 days, and then he was kind of born again into this different perspective of what he was doing. So he's comparing that as he comes into the end of his ministry, right? This 3 days of death, right, before he rises again. We won't get too into that. But let's get into this one a little bit farther, okay? And it says, "I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Okay, and so we have a little bit of information going on here, okay, that we've all heard before. We've heard in other denominations. We're going to touch on that a little bit. But I wanted to give you a breakdown. And in the Greek here, okay, we have two words for, we have a masculine and a feminine is what it would be called for the rock, okay, that we're talking about here. Okay, so, and there's two different words that are used in Scripture. We have Petros, which means small stone or pebble, okay? And then we have Petras, which would be like big cliff, right? Or rock. And so comparing the two, Jesus, that's what he's doing. He's comparing the two types of rocks here, okay? And the reason that matters is because Peter would be the first, right? And so the Catholics would tell you that St. Peter was the first pope, and from succession from there on is how we have the pope, which is why he is so highly honored. But they're misinterpreting the language here to say that Peter is the rock, right? And so, but we know that Jesus is the cornerstone, right? And actually I can go down here, that's Ephesians 2:20 for our terminology and co-text of Jesus being the cornerstone. Okay, so we know that, and so they're different rocks, different names that are being used in the language that it was written. And so Peter is not the rock of the church, right? That would be Jesus. And so he is comparing the two of what he's doing. And we're going to touch on the location here in just a minute as well, when I told you to kind of highlight that location. And so Matthew talks the most about the unpardonable sin, and therefore he talks most about the consequences of the unpardonable sins, or the unpardonable sin, and or the future of what's happening, right? And so he uses the word church. And so let's go down into here. It says, I will build my church. On this rock I will build my church. Okay, he's not talking about Peter there. Remember, we have two different ones. Okay, but anyway, we'll get into that again. So, and on this rock I will build my church. So the other three Gospels, so Mark, Luke, and John, do not use the word church. Interesting enough. And so another thing here to point out is it says the gates of Hades. Okay, and I'm going to give you some scriptures for some co-text. But the gates of Hades here stands for, or refers to, a physical death. It's an idiom for physical death. This is not hell, right, and hellfire and the devil. It is literally physical death will not prevail against it, right? And so it won't prevail against the church. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so the Hebrew thought here is that physical death, right? So Jesus' death and the death of the apostles and the martyrs and everything, that's not going to destroy the church, because there is physical death amongst them, right? And so Jesus is specifying here that the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it, right? That the church cannot be destroyed by physical death. And so we spoke here of Caesarea Philippi. This is where Jesus is, the location. I kind of told you just a little bit about the location, where it's at. But the reason that this is so important is because he's in a very small, insignificant area, and he's about 15 miles or so from Galilee. But, and we spoke before, you saw notes about being a part of the tribe of Naphtali. That's this location is, belonged to the tribe of Naphtali. Okay, but Caesarea Philippi is where Jesus, right, the Son of God, declared the beginning of his church. So that's the huge point here, is that Jesus is now declaring the beginning of his church. We have his location, where he is, who he's talking to, and on this rock I will build my church, right? And physical death will not prevail against it, right? The gates of Hades. And so that's the big point and takeaway from this, is that Jesus chose a very small and insignificant area and declared something that's monumental, right? And so I spoke about this in class a little bit if you were there, that we can kind of take from this now that sometimes we feel very small and insignificant, and in the grand scheme of life we are, right?